Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melissa Latimer. I'm the Associate Provost for Faculty Development here at WVU. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our first workshop of the fall semester. So I hope things are going well for you and that you will continue to seek out workshops like these to assist you in all parts of your faculty life. Brian Meredith is our presenter today, and he will be introducing you to the system that we use for storing information for annual evaluation as well as promotion and our tenure. Chris Staples and I are here to answer questions that might be very specific to the promotion and tenure process. I want to thank Julie Black for her technical assistance today. She's our colleague out of Teaching and Learning Commons. We will be using the chat function so that you can put questions in there, and Chris and I will be watching and sort of feeding it back to Brian. We're also making it possible for you to either raise your hand or unmute and ask a question. So before I turn it over to Brian, I just want to let you know that after we get going here, I will just drop in the link one more time. Where do you go to find additional workshops out of our office? And then also, where will you find the recording of the workshop once it's been transcribed? So I'll put that link in the chat after we get started here. Brian?
Okay, thank you, Melissa. So as Melissa said, my name is Brian Meredith. I am the Central DM Administrator here at WVU. I have a title, but a lot of people just call me the DM guy. So what are we going to be talking about today? So we're going to be talking about digital measures. This is digital measures. This is, you might hear it called DM. As of a few days ago, the parent company of Digital Measures decided that they wanted to rebrand. If there's any marketing folks here, they might not understand brand equity. However, you may hear the system referred to as faculty success if you look at some of the branding in the actual system. However, on campus, we know it as DM. We're just going to keep calling it DM. So that is what your colleagues are referring to when they say, you got to put something in DM. So what is it? As Melissa touched on, the DM is the system that we use institution-wide for both annual reviews as well as promotion and tenure reviews. So it's the system that basically replaced the paper filing system that we used to have prior to 2016. So file cabinets and bankers boxes, that's all digitized. It's all in digital measures. If you're coming to us from another institution, there's a high chance you've used it. Other institutions in the state that use it are Marshall and Fairmont State. If you are coming from another institution that use digital measures and you would like to copy some of your data over, shoot me a message. I can ask digital measures to do that. We'll have to get permission from your old school. But that is a possibility if you want to save a little bit of time on some of your background information that you may put into the system. So today we're going to be discussing the how you use the system and where you put certain things in. Melissa and Chris are here to help with some of the substantive questions you may have. But really what we're going to be looking at today are the procedural questions. So I do this thing, where do I put it? How do I use the system? So at the very start, I want to talk about where you can get help. If you look at digital measures when you log in, and I'll show you what the system looks like here in just a moment. But if you log in, there is a help button. That button is somewhat misnamed. It really doesn't provide all that much assistance. If you click the help button, it'll pop up a little window and say send a message. That message goes to someone overseas, and all they can really help you with is if digital measures would happen to be down. Any other question that you might ask, they provide to me without any context as to what you were doing or where you were in the system. And they provide that to me a few days later. So if you have a question, I would encourage you not to actually use the help button and reach out to someone to get some help. So who you can reach out to? Well, there's always me. I'm happy to help out at any time. If you Google me or you look at the login page, which I'll show you in just a moment, you'll see my name all over it. But there's also a list of DM administrators that we have at each college. So this person or persons are going to be they're going to be familiar with the unique layout and practices of your implementation. So feel free to shoot them a message and they will be able to help you. You've also got, because we've been using it for a while, you've got the support of your colleagues. Like I say, we've been using it in some form or fashion now for 2016. So reach out to your colleagues and they can always help you as well. And I mentioned that we're not going to go too far into substantive questions, but I do, before we get too far into the procedural, I do want to just touch on this briefly, Melissa, if that's all right. If you have questions about what you should be doing, a good place to start, really the only place to start, is with your appointment letter. So always look at that appointment letter if you have questions about your assignment. But there are other sources of information as well for substantive questions. And those can be, if you've been here more than a year, you're going to have old reviews that are going to give you guidance and things that you should be doing. And then you've also got guidelines, and there's multiple levels of guidelines. And I'm sure Melissa will and Chris will be talking about this in other sessions at some point. You've got guidelines at the university level, you've got guidelines at the college level, and potentially you have guidelines at the department level. And if you don't know where those are, if you just Google WVU promotion and tenure, it'll bring you to the page on the faculty resource website that has a link to all those guidelines that you can look at. So with that said, let's get into the high level overview of what you're going to be doing with digital measures. It's really 3 steps. You're going to be entering data about what you're doing with regard to your assignment. That's teaching, research, or service, one of those, or one or more of those areas. You're going to be running a report, and that report is the only thing that's going to get reviewed. And then you're going to submit that report back into the system. So you're entering data, you're running a report, and you're submitting that report. At its core, that's all we're doing. So with that said, what I would like to do now is share my screen, and we will show you the basics of logging in. So the best way to get to this, as is the best way to do any other thing that is related to your faculty appointment, is to head to the faculty resources website, which is faculty.wvu.edu. If you do that and you scroll down, under Provost Reed's picture, you're going to see a link to digital measures. If you click that, it's going to bring you to this page. You can also get to this page. Again, if you just Google WVU digital measures, it will bring you directly to this page. You do have a third option of going in through the portal. If any of you use the portal, portal.wvu.edu, there is a link to digital measures. If you click that link, it will take you directly into the system. It'll bypass this page. I recommend looking at this page because it does have a list of your administrators. So if you click on this list, on this link, it will show you all the administrators that I mentioned earlier that are really good points of contact if you have questions about how to use the system. It also has some guides on how to basic use of the system. So these aren't in-depth guides with a lot of substantive solutions. As I mentioned, the substance of what you're doing can be found elsewhere. But these are very mechanical, short guides to show you how to do what you need to do in the system. You can grab those as you'd like. So once you're ready to go, you click the blue login button. It'll take you to enter in your WVU username and password with 2-factor authentication. And once you do that, you'll arrive at a screen that looks like this. If you enter in your WVU username and password and it takes you to another screen that has a blue background and looks completely different, that's an error with the login. That means your account isn't set up or something isn't set up correctly. Reach out to me and we'll see if we can figure out what's going on there. And I believe I see a question in the chat from Casey Kidd. That is you are looking at the error login page and something is not right with your account. So if you'll shoot me an email, I will look into that after the session and we can figure out what's going on. If you do get in, again, this is what your screen looks like. I will note that I am under a test account for the English department in Arts and Sciences. So if you're in another college, your screen may not look like this. There may be subtle differences. You may have an extra screen here. More than likely, if you're not in Eberly, you're not going to have a screen that says Eberly workload information. But the general overview of how the system is laid out is going to look the same. So I do want to note a couple of things that have changed if we have any return users here from last year. We have an extra item up in this toolbar that I want to touch on just as an FYI. DM has introduced a feature called CV imports. In my testing, this isn't the greatest feature in the world. However, it does exist, and I wanted to touch on it in case you try it. If you use this feature, it in theory allows you to upload a CV that you have in any other format, and it will then import the information from that CV directly into the system, into the appropriate location in the system. However, my testing has shown that it's somewhat time intensive. And in discussing this feature with other administrators from around the country, they've found that users tend to spend as much or more time trying to make their CV fit and work with the import feature than if they had just entered it in themselves. However, I do want to make you aware that it does exist. I would just caution you that if you try to use it, make sure that you're not spending more time trying to make it work rather than just entering the data into the system. And as you'll see when we get in here, entering the data in the system is very straightforward. It's not technically complex. So it's really not a huge time sink in terms of technically how you do it. It's just a matter of keeping up with it throughout the year and saving yourself time when it comes time to, at the end of the year, reporting.
Hey, Brian, can you clarify something for us?
Sure.
What about our health sciences colleagues?
Sure. So the health sciences colleagues, what in specifically what about?
So their emails are not going to end in mail.wvu.edu. They're going to be health sciences. So do they log in at the same place? Are they using the same system?
Correct. So if you are logging in from health sciences, you're going to use the same thing. What Casey is referring to, and let me show everybody just in case they would like to see. If you try to log in and you see a screen that looks like this, that simply means that your account isn't set up correctly. So if you see this at mail.wvu.edu, and for instance, you have an HSC address, this is an old depreciated login that only I use to log in. That's why it still exists. But what it means is that the connection to your WVU account isn't set up correctly. So if you see this, there's a problem, and just let me know.
Thank you, Brian.
Certainly. So the main screen of DM, after we get through the toolbar at the top. Well, it's laid out into sections, and these sections will look somewhat familiar to you when we get to the middle. So they kind of look like a sandwich of sorts. If we look at the bread in the sandwich, we've got general information at the top, and then we've got archived reports at the and documents at the bottom. Those are both important. However, the real meat of where you're going to enter in data about what you're doing are in these three sections in the middle: teaching, research, and service. And we're going to talk about each of these in turn. But what I want to emphasize, though, is that when you look at these, you're going to see a lot of places to enter in information. So don't panic. What you're seeing here is a Swiss Army knife. That's what digital measures is. When you have an R1 institution, academic life at an R1 institution is varied. If we were all doing the same thing the same way and had the same things to report, it wouldn't be a very diverse or useful institution. So you're going to see places here to enter data that may not apply to you, and that's fine. Simply because these places exist does not mean that you're required to put information into them. As I mentioned at the very beginning, when it comes to substantive questions, so what am I actually required to put into the system? That again comes from your appointment letter and your expectations under your P&T guidelines. The example I've been using for a few years now, and I'm going to continue to use because it's a great example, is this section, or screen as we call them here: media appearances, contributions, and interviews. As a new faculty, you might be logging in and thinking, wait a minute, I'm supposed to do appearances in the media and I'm supposed to do interviews. Is that part of my job description? No, not necessarily. It may be, depending on where you are in the institution. You may be in a department that, as part of your requirements for P&T, you are expected to appear in the media and give interviews as part of your either service or research. However, if you are not expected to do that, because this screen exists, it doesn't mean that you have to put data here. So when you're looking at this system and you scroll down and you say, well, there's a billion links here where I could put data, start with what you need to put in and find a place for it. Then if you see some extra screens, it might jog your memory to load in some activities that you're doing, but they may simply not be applicable to you, and that's fine. And the same thing goes when we get to the actual data fields within these screens, and we'll get there in a moment. There may be fields that aren't applicable to you. What you want to think about when you're putting data in the system is, what do I need to add such that someone sitting in an office somewhere who may not know me personally can understand what I'm doing? So you may not need, I'm trying to think of, in the publication screen, there's tons of fields that you can fill out. You may not need every single one of those fields to get the substance of what you're doing across. In that screen, for instance, we would absolutely need what the thing is. Is it a journal? Is it a book? The title, where it is, and a copy of the thing. But we may not need, for instance, the country of the publisher. So use a little common sense when you're putting in data, and think to yourself, what would someone sitting in a room somewhere who may not know need to evaluate what I'm doing? And also note, when you look through some of these categories, you're going to see things that may count for you in an area which they're in isn't what it's labeled here on the screen. So for instance, under this media appearances, contributions, and interviews, let's say this is something that you need to be documenting. It's under general information. That's fine. If your unit counts that as service, that's great. Same with academic advising. Let's say that your unit counts that as service and not teaching. That's fine. Don't panic. As the most important thing to remember here is to get it in the system, to get it in the space that best fits. And your unit's guidelines will dictate where they count that. The heading will not. That's what's most important to remember as you do it. So with that said, we're going to take a minute. Are there any major questions, Melissa? Not right now, just about account setting up. And again, I'll get to those after the session's over. So let's start with the general information section. So as its title implies, this just has information that is very general to your appointment at WVU and may not be tied to a specific area. Starting with the administrative data, permanent data, if you click on this screen, you'll see some very basic data about your appointment here at WVU. One thing that I want to point out right at the start of talking about this is, if you see a little lock icon, you'll note that you can't change anything about this field. So you can't change when you started. For instance, you can't give yourself a promotion, and you can't change your critical year. If there is an error with information on the screen, please reach out to your college DM administrator. Reach out to them first, because they have access to your information in the dean's office. I may not have access to that information at my level, but if you reach out to them and you can't get something changed, of course, feel free to reach out to me and we'll figure out what is going on. So I would ask that you look at these screens of the administrative data. Permanent data, again, has basic information about your appointment. Yearly data just shows a track of how you go through. So for instance, on this one, we can see this person was an assistant, promoted to associate. Make sure that information looks correct. If something is not correct, reach out to your DM admin at the college and let them know. And restricted access documents. This is an area that is not included for faculty evaluation committee review. So you may have documents stored here that are either sensitive or may contain unredacted information, but these are not included in the review process. This is more of just your restricted personnel file that only you and your chair and the administration can see. So we've got some other screens here. I'm going to touch on most of them. Professional positions outside of WVU. This is just to, if you're, for instance, using the system to build a CV, which you absolutely can maintain a CV and DM, you can fill that in and populate some of the prior positions that you've had. Administrative assignments is where you would be documenting what you have done if you have an administrative assignment, such as, let's say you're an associate department chair or you're a department chair. You would be adding a record in there. Awards and honors. For those of you who are not new, this used to be awards, honors, and endowed positions. we have since last year split this into 2 screens. So awards and honors and endowed positions are 2 separate screens now. Endowed positions, we have made records for all the endowed faculty. If you are an endowed faculty and you do not have a record in endowed positions, please let me know, and I will reach out to the foundation, confirm that endowed position with them, and add it for you. For all other awards and honors that you want to denote in your file to show them the good work that you're doing, you go to awards and honors. And I would like to show you what adding a record looks like now with that screen, since we're up here at the top. So if you click on the screen, you are going to see a list of the things that are already in the screen. So if you're brand new, you're going to come to a screen that's going to be completely empty. I would also take a moment to pause here for any of our returning users who have good memories. The screen may look a little bit different. As of last week, DM rolled out another improvement that allows you to filter and sort the screen like you would any other spreadsheet application. They have moved the checkboxes from the right to the left. But apart from that, the screen looks pretty similar. If I want to add a new record, and this goes for any screen in the system, I'll click on Add New. So when I click on Add New, I'm presented with a number of fields to fill out about the thing that I'm doing. Now, if you recall back from a little bit ago, I mentioned that you may not need to fill out every single field. However, you need to fill out enough fields that someone sitting in an office who may not know you knows what you're doing. Some fields will be required, absolutely required, before you can save a record. If so, they'll have a little red icon beside of them, and it won't let you save the record until you've filled out that field. So let's just do a sample entry here. Let's say I've received an honor, and let's say it is the best award for faculty. And let's say that comes from the IAA. I don't know what organization that is. I just made it up. So what else might I need to add here? Well, I might need to add a short description. And I can add as much text here as I want. I can format it if I'd like to. I can add bold. I can add anything else to these screens. And then finally, we come down here to the date and the document. So every record that you put in the system has to have a date. It's a dumb computer system at the end of the day, and it doesn't know what to put in a report unless you tell it what to put in a report. So when you run a report, and it's a preview at the very end, you'll give it a range of dates for what you want to include. The system doesn't know what to include in that range unless you date things. In most screens in the system, you're going to have the option for at least one date field. On this, you have 2. When you see you have 2 date fields, you'll note there's some text. It says, for non-term awards, leave the start date blank and specify only the end date. That's also the case if you do something that just happens on one date. But if you have something that goes over a term of years, or an undefined term, you can add a start date. If you don't add an end date, that thing will run to present. So let's say you do something every year. This is most applicable when we come to the service screens. But let's say you're on the same committee, and you're on that committee every year. You've been on that committee for the last 10 years, and you're going to be on it for the next 10. You put a start date. So let's say I started this January 1 of 2017, and I don't put an end date. If I click save, and we go back to the best award for faculty, you'll see that it starts in 2017, but it does not end. So if I run a report right now, that record will be included. If I run a report next year, that record will be included. So you can save yourself a lot of time by using the date fields appropriately. So you don't have to go back and add something every year if it's the same activity every year. I do also want to mention the document field. When you're building your file, of course, we've got all these places to enter in data in the system, and that's great. However, you should also be documenting your file to the extent you can. Some things will lend themselves to documentation more easily than others. For instance, when we talk about the publication screen under research, you're going to have to upload a copy of that publication. That's easy. However, when we're talking about service or maybe even awards and honors, you might not have a document per se that tells you exactly, or the documents exactly what you're putting in the system. If you've got an email that says, hey, you've gotten this award or you're on this committee, turn it into a PDF and add it. But if you can't find any documentation for something, that's fine. Just make sure that you've thought about it and you've completely documented everything else you can about that activity if you don't have a piece of documentation to support it. However, it's a great idea as you serve on committees and you get awards and you get those emails, save them as a PDF, print to PDF, do whatever you need to do. Keep them in a folder on your desktop or go into the system and immediately upload them. So that way, when it comes time for your review, or in 4 or 5 or 6 years, when it comes time for your promotion and tenure review, you have everything in the system ready to go and there's no stress.
Brian, is there, what file formats are acceptable?
Okay, so DM will take pretty much anything. I think DM will take everything. It might even take executable files these days. If you have something that you need to upload that's a sample of your work that's in a piece of software. The only limitation is file size. As of last check, they do have a limit of about 100 megabytes per file. So if you're trying to upload something larger than 100 megabytes, and I know 100 megabytes is not large in today's world, you can reach out to me and we can think of some other ways to do that. Most oftentimes what I recommend is to upload that somewhere and put a link in one of the fields and say, hey, this is a copy of my thing. It's too large to upload. But you can also, there's no collective limit. So if you've got 20, 100 megabyte files, you can absolutely upload those. It's just, that's the only limitation. I will mention that if you're uploading things, my preferred or my recommended format is PDF. And the only reason being for that is that folks use Macs, folks use PCs, some folks use Linux, a myriad of different software out there. PDF is compatible across all of them. If you're uploading something in a Word document, I would urge you to consider if maybe you could just save that as a PDF instead. But the system ultimately will accept anything. So I'm in this record. Let's say that I put this record in the system and I realized, wait a minute, that was a mistake. It shouldn't have gone here. How do I get it out? Well, you'll see this checkbox. As I mentioned before, last year was on the right side of the screen. Now it's on the left. If you click this checkbox by that record I just put in the system, you'll see these two buttons at the above that column of checkboxes light up. One says duplicate and one says delete select item. So if I want, I can click delete. It will always ask you to confirm. You can't do anything on accident. It'll always ask you to confirm your activity. If I click delete, then it gets rid of that thing. Since we're here, let's talk about that duplicate button. Why would you ever use that? Well, I mentioned before that if you're doing something the same way and you're doing it over a long period of time, you can put it in once, add a start date, no end date, and it'll just run forever. It'll run until you tell it not to. However, if you're doing something that's similar but not exactly the same, you can click the duplicate button. What that will do is it will copy forward all the contents of that record. You can maybe make a change to it, a slight change here. You can change the date. And now when I click save, you'll see that it copied forward the name and the other fields. However, it's got a new date. And if I go back into it, you can see that the slight change is there. So if you're doing things that are similar over and over again, that's a real time saver. And I would encourage you to take advantage of that. So that was entering a record. Let's continue really quickly on the general before we get to teaching. So we've got other fields here for consulting. This is any consulting you do outside the university. This is where you would document it. Education, very important here. When you go to your education screen, under your highest degree, you should absolutely have a copy of your transcript uploaded. This field is read only to you. Your dean's office or someone in your department should be uploading this. If you do not have a transcript here, please reach out to your dean's office and inquire why. We need transcripts to conform to the HLC credentialing requirements that we are WVU is accredited by. That transcript is private. It's not included in the productivity report we submit at the end of the process. So your faculty evaluation committees do not see it. However, we do need it for credentialing. So if you don't see that there, if you don't have one there, reach out to your dean's office. And we've got some other items here, faculty development activities attended. So those are CLEs or anything that you may do to better yourself as a faculty member. If licensures and certifications are applicable to your appointment, say you've got a PE, a professional engineer, something like that, then those would be noted there. Media appearances, contributions, interviews, as I mentioned before, that may be a part of your appointment. It may not be. If it is, you would denote them there. Professional memberships and workload information. Workload information is going to be one of those read-only screens that's filled up by your dean's office. Your unit may or may not use this part of DM. If you don't see anything there, you might just check with your chair, say, hey, do we use this? And if something needs to be fixed, that'll have to be fixed administratively for you. Melissa, before we move on to teaching, are there any questions I see here pop up?
There was a question about, for your second year, when you're doing your second year review, does it include both years? And what I indicated is it only does that if you include the dates for both years. If it's an annual review, you should only include the dates for the year under review.
Correct. And I think substantively, they may also wonder if your first annual review, that would only include the first, the period that you're here, correct?
Right.
Right. Deadlines are get to be a little bit interesting, especially because we don't have one system for all of the universities. So when we talk about deadlines and reporting periods, some of you folks may be on the academic year system, such as the Department of English and Arts and Sciences. Some of you may be on the calendar year system, and some of you may be on the fiscal year system.
And let me just clarify, if someone came from another university, it's possible that they got a couple of years toward tenure here, so they would need to include all that prior information as well. So it might include the whole year, not just from August to December. Just wanted to clarify that. And then you've got a question about professional memberships. Do we include general memberships or positions with national recognition, such as being a chair?
And I would include both, I would say. I would absolutely include both. And to address that other question I saw that just popped up, and it speaks to what you were mentioning a moment ago, Melissa, should you include data or awards that occurred before starting at WVU? So when it comes to receiving credit for things that you do at WVU, what Melissa said, generally you start, if you don't receive credit for time served elsewhere, then the only important things that you're going to be evaluated on are things that occurred since your start date at WVU. However, if you've received credit for things, so let's say you've got a couple years credit towards your tenure clock here, then those activities are going to be reviewed and absolutely need to be in the system. When it comes to professional memberships that started or occurred before WVU, and let's just say that these aren't critical to your appointment, but you would still like to denote them, you can absolutely go ahead and put them in. Like I said before, you can use this, the system to maintain a CV. I know everybody has their own CV system that they like, but you can put in all those things and it will generate a CV for you. So I'd encourage you to put those things in, just with the understanding that the things that are reviewed are since you started or for those years that you received credit. Okay, let's jump on to the filling of the sandwich. Teaching. So a lot of you, especially those of you who have a teaching assignment in your appointment, are going to spend a lot of time here. We do some things to help you out with that, but let's start by reviewing the academic advising screen. So this is where you're going to put in activity about advising that you may do. So that's undergraduate advising, that's graduate advising, that might be professional advising if you're in the School of Medicine or the College of Law or any of the other health sciences schools. And very simply, you'll see you have a few fields here that you can fill out. I advise 10 undergraduate and graduate students. It can be something as simple as that. You do note here that the supporting documentation field is collapsed. DM has done this to ostensibly save screen real estate. So if you have a record that you've already made and you've uploaded the document, this field will be collapsed. If you click the little caret to expand it down, you can see where you can add that file. If you need to go back and add more files to a record, you can click Add Row, and you can add as many things as you need. As I mentioned before, there's no cumulative limit on the number of things you can put in, just a simple 100 megabyte per limit. You can reorder things by clicking and dragging them around. Drag this one around if I need to.
Brian, can they just drop their Google teaching page link there?
There are locations to put things about your Google Scholar page. And then I also see something about linking from PubMed. Let's save that until we get to research, if we can come back to that.
Okay.
So that's academic advising very quickly. Do you need to upload evidence of advising? Again, that just depends. If you've got good evidence of it, you can, of course, we encourage you to load that in. However, this is very much your best judgment. Is this something that's common in your unit? You might reach out to your chair and say, hey, in our unit, do we put copies of the emails saying we advised all these students, or are you okay with us just noting that we advised 20 students? Definitely reach out to your chair and your colleagues to see what the best practice is in your particular unit. So directed student learning. A lot of you are going to have a lot of activity here if you are a tenure track member of the faculty and you work with graduate students. So as you'll see here with some of the examples I have, these are some of the examples of what you can put in here. Let's say you sit on a dissertation committee, either the committee body or the chair itself, or you do undergraduate research or graduate research. It's going to look very similar to adding a record. I'm going to go ahead and click one that I've already added. So you'll see that on some of the fields, there are drop downs, and these give you certain types that you can add. Again, it's a Swiss Army knife, so you're going to see a big list. When you see a list like this, there will always be an other field. So if you have something that doesn't quite fit one of the predetermined types, but does fit in this screen, you can choose other, and then you can give it a brief explanation. I would note that if you keep using that over and over and over again, please reach out to your DM admin or myself, because it may not be that you're putting something in the correct place. If you have to keep choosing other over and over again, just let us know so we can make sure that you're in the right place. But again, enter in as much as you need to. Stage of completion, perhaps a brief description, and of course, dates. When you're done, you click save. And I do note that when you click save, it now gives you a little green record has been saved confirmation that you have saved that record. If you go in and you change something and you try to back out of it, it will always warn you, and it'll say, hey, are you sure you want to leave? So if you do make a change and you want that change to save, you have to click the save button. If you make a change and you want to abandon it, click cancel. It'll ask you to confirm, and you cancel. I see some more questions, Melissa. Again, yes, I would recommend that you check with your chair and your unit to find out what the expectations are therein. So,
is there a space for putting in the names of the students?
Sorry, is there a space under academic advising? Under
Either one of those, for the master's, dissertation, and as well as for academic advising.
Academic advising, because it's expected there will probably be more than one, there's no space for a name. Under directed student learning, I believe we do have space for a name.
That's my memory as well.
Yes, so student information. So you can add as many students as you need. It can be one student, it could be a number of students, but you can add a name there. And I do mention that there are advanced reports in the system, such as an NSF collaborators report. So if you put in your students, it will spit them back out in that report. Non-credit instruction, it's a bit of a misnomer. It's not that you're not receiving credit for it. This is typically for instruction that you do for which WVU students do not receive credit. So a classic example here would be You give an instruction at a professional review course or a continuing education somewhere, something that you're teaching, but for which not WVU students are receiving credit. So the big one for a lot of you, and probably the biggest for the teaching faculty, is going to be scheduled teaching. So scheduled teaching, this screen we link to the Banner system. So if you are listed in Banner as an instructor, be it primary or secondary, and you have a non-0% of responsibility in that course, we will bring it in and populate it into the screen for you. Now you'll note that as a faculty member, I can't add items here myself. And the simple reason is because we have the integration with Banner and it could break that integration. So if something is missing here, there's a form. And if you see at the very top of the page, it says if something is missing here from previous semesters, please complete and submit the form found here. If you click that, it'll take you to a Qualtrics form. Please fill out as much information as you can, including the course number and CRN. And if you submit that, we'll have those in for you in a couple of weeks. I have not included the fall 2021 courses yet. I usually wait until about a week after the drop add period has passed so that instructors are all entered into the system. So look for fall 2021 courses to be populated here in the next week or so. So if you're a brand new faculty, you log in, you won't see anything here yet. Please check back shortly. You will see a list of courses. If you're an older faculty member or you've been here for more than a year, you will see some courses here. As I mentioned before, the sorting feature has been improved. So now if you only want to see courses from a given year, you can filter just like you would any spreadsheet. It'll make it a little bit easier to find out what your courses look like. So once this section is populated for your new users or for the old users, if you want to look now, if you click on one of these entries, you'll see a number of fields in which you can enter data. So a lot of these are going to be locked because they come straight from Banner. So we can't change these. If we were to change them in the system, they would just be overwritten from Banner. You will note at the very top that there's a checkbox and it says, check here to exclude this course from your productivity report. We added this checkbox for the case where you may have a number of courses under your name that you're not actually instructing, or a number of sections that you aren't actually instructing. You can check that box and they won't be deleted from your account. But they won't appear in your productivity report. And that productivity report is the only thing that is reviewed at the end of the review period by your chair and your committee. So if you have some things that, again, don't necessarily apply to what you're teaching, you can exclude them. If I scroll down again past all these fields that are read-only, we've got some additional fields. And again, you fill these fields out as they are applicable to you. What we absolutely need, however, is a syllabus. So that's going to be a requirement for every course that you teach. You're going to have to upload the syllabus. Below the syllabus, you're going to see a space for student evaluation and instruction documentation, and it's going to be locked. So this is something else we do for you. At the end of every term, I take all the SEI that comes out and I load it into your accounts automatically. The timing of this is generally good in the spring and the summer. However, in the fall, it can get a little bit tight. With the end of the semester happening late in December, and the knowledge that I have to send these off to digital measures to be loaded into the system with a delay of anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks. If your review deadline is December 31st, there may be an issue with getting these in automatically. So you can always upload your own SEI summary for fall semester in the supporting document field. You can choose what that is, and you can hit save. This will put your SEI up so that it's able to be reviewed by your review committee and your chair. Sorry, I see a question here about linking to a syllabus. If the course is asynchronous, there's a web page, not a PDF. If you have a web page that is not going to change, you can add a link to it in one of the other fields. And I would use the space for any other comments. I would add a link here. If it's something that could change, And that link may not be available in 5 or 6 years. I would encourage you to take a snapshot of that as a PDF, maybe print to PDF, print that web page, or print it out and scan it. I would strongly encourage you not to link to web pages, if at all possible. Again, because in 5 or 6 years, when you go up for promotion and tenure, that syllabus may no longer be available. So I would say yes, that is possible. However, I would encourage you to upload as a PDF. And under supporting documentation, you could upload any other number of documents that you would add to a teaching portfolio. So maybe a sample quiz, sample test, maybe some sample feedback, anything here that you feel is relevant and helps somebody to evaluate your course. Are there any questions that we have in the chat? If you have any questions that you don't want to ask right now, keep them in mind, and we'll talk about them more at the end of the session, because this is a very important screen. You're going to have a lot of activity here. So again, just like any other screen, after I'm done, I'm going to hit save, and you'll see that the record has been saved, and it shows that they're at the very top. As you add things, the default sort order, by the way, is always going to be the most recent things are at the top of the screen. And one other note is that when you click this exclude button, the chairs and the committees do have reports to run to see if anything is being improperly excluded. So if you're not sure whether you should exclude something, I would encourage you to reach out to your chair or your evaluation committee and just see what they would like you to do. So if you're adding documents for your credit years, do you use dates prior to your start date at WVU? So absolutely. You're going to date it for whenever the thing actually happened. And then when you run that report, and we'll get to the report generation here in a little bit, you'll just make sure to include those dates. When it comes to scheduled teaching, when it comes to teaching activities that may have happened before your start date at WVU, and if you're getting credit for those, that's a little bit of a special situation because scheduled teaching is really only designed for WVU courses. If you're in that situation, reach out to me and I will work with you and your DM admin to figure out the best place to load those activities. Okay, before we move on from scheduled teaching, I do want to point out this question from Rebecca. If you were a GTA, you will see some courses here because I populate everybody who's in Banner. Those courses, if they occurred before your start date, if you run your report from your start date forward, those courses won't be included in the report anyway. So we'll see that in more detail when we get to the reporting section. But you're going to say my report's going to run from August 15, 2021 to August 14, 2022. Therefore, if you have a course that you taught as a GTA in 2016 or 2017, it just naturally won't be included in that report, and you do not need to exclude those manually. Okay, so course or lab supervision. This is where you can denote if you are, again, a course coordinator or something where you're supervising a course or a lab. If you click on it, you'll see that you can add information about the number of teachers you supervised, other information about the course, as well as supporting documents. So that is if you're, a special case where you may be supervising a course or lab. And these three final sections here in the default or the sample screen, I'm showing you current student success activity, graduate placement information or alumni success, and teaching innovation and curriculum development. These are specialty screens. Current student success activity is really something that you're doing beyond the classroom to help your students with success. That might be special review sessions or non-course instruction sessions that you want to denote as teaching activity. Graduate placement information is just that. Maybe you're writing some letters for your students to obtain placement in grad schools or obtain positions in the private sector. And teaching innovation and curricular development. You'll note that actually under scheduled teaching, if I pull up a screen really quickly, there is a place to describe any pedagogical innovations that you introduced into the course this year or any new teaching material. So these are minor changes that you're making to a course. However, if you are setting up a brand new course or you're doing, let's say I know the School of Medicine just redid their curricula for their med students, that is where you would add that. So that's a very concerted effort that is beyond just changing one or two things on a given course.
Hey, Brian, where do you place evidence that you've taught in someone else's class? You'd like a guest lecture?
Yeah, that would probably be so a guest lecture. So in the School of Medicine and the Health Sciences course in the Health Sciences schools, there's a lot of team teaching. And I don't know if that individual is from the School of Medicine or one of the Health Sciences schools. We do have a course, or we do have a screen for the School of Medicine called Clinical or Other Teaching. And that screen is really designed if you give 1 or 2 guest lectures. For instance, my wife would give a guest lecture in biochem, maybe once or twice a semester. The clinical or other teaching is a great place to locate that if you're in one of those schools that has that screen. If you're giving a guest lecture and you're not in the School of Medicine, that's a good question, and we will always have some of these gray areas. I would suggest that non-credit instruction taught would be a good place to put that one single course, even though I mentioned before it's typically for instruction where WVU students don't receive credit, but that would work. If you'd like to reach out to me individually, I'd be happy to discuss that a little bit more, and we could maybe figure out a better place for it if one exists. But I would note that if you're in a team teaching environment, like in the health sciences, you do have that clinical or other teaching screen, which is a great place to record single lectures you may give. Scheduled teaching is really only for systematic things that you do. So maybe you teach a unit, maybe you teach 3 weeks out of that team taught course. Then that's the better place for it in scheduled teaching, but single lectures, not as much. Okay, well, let's move on to scholarship and research. We touched on this briefly a little bit before. Let's start with these 3 screens here at the top. So here's where we do more for you. We have a link with WVU KC, so Quali. We take all of your proposals that you put in the system in Quali, any awards that you receive, and for the health sciences folks, any IRB protocols that you're named on, and we load these for you automatically. We do this once a month throughout the year. It's normally about the first week that I do the import. When we get towards the end of the year, with it comes to promotion and tenure time, I'm doing this more frequently. Usually I do it every week in December. If there is a delay, let's say, in that it's been the first of the month, it hasn't shown up, and it hasn't done that for a month or 2, reach out to me and I'll see what's going on. Sometimes there can be delays at OSP in finalizing the information such that it's available for me to import. But if you see something there and it hasn't appeared a couple months after it should have done, let me know and we can look into it. So let me show you what these look like. It's going to look just like the other screens we've looked at so far. There's a bit of helpful text at the top that explains what's going on here. If you click on one of these records, again, because this is something that we do automatic, when we do automatic imports for you, because it's your file, we want to give you control over it. So if something has come in that is incorrect, that is, maybe you're listed as a key personnel, but that was a clerical error and you're really not, you can check that box and it will pull it off of your faculty productivity report.
Brian, it includes every grant submitted, correct?
Excuse me. So under proposals, it will include everything you've submitted to OSP. Now, it will not show internal grants. So if you have an internal award, it will not show those. But anything that is submitted to OSP for funding, and that's pending, accepted, rejected, any status, it will show up.
Great, thank you.
Let's see. So we have the fields that are read-only. We can't change any of this information. So if you expand out proposal information, we do our best here to pull things over accurately from KC. However, sometimes the data either isn't correct in the field we're looking at in KC, or it's just simply not being pulled over correctly. This field for description of explanation of discrepancies, if there are any, please use that field. So let's say this pulls in as a $10 million or a $1,000 grant, but it's actually a $10 million grant. Absolutely let the committee know that there. We can look and we can try and figure out what's going on, but immediately, absolutely let them know in that field that something is just not exactly correct, so that they can consider that in the review. We do have a space for documentation. Again, you should be putting in documentation for the proposals that you submit, blue sheets or green sheets, as well as any other documentation that you would like. At the bottom, you'll see some dates. These dates will look a little bit weird on resubmissions because you'll see the date that you originally received it will be a couple years ago, and then when it was most recently submitted for, let's say, a renewal or a resubmission of that proposal will be updated and submitted for funding. But it should include it in the reporting period that's most applicable to you. If the dates are incorrect, as far as you're working on something, it's active and it's not coming into your report, let me know and we'll look into it. So the award screen is going to look very similar to the proposal screen, but this is going to be for things that have actually been successful and been funded. Again, there's going to be some read-only information, exclusion if it's not correct, and then an option to describe it or correct any errors in the above, and then a space for the award letter and any documentation.
Brian, let me ask you just a general question. You know, so we update digital measures each year, and then like within a 3 to 5 year period, something you might have been told to put something in one place, and then 3 years later there might be a new specific link for that piece of information. Does that make sense? And so somebody's asking the question, like, do we leave it where it is because it still shows up, right? It just shows up in a different place, or should we actually like amend it and move it somewhere else? This has to do with updates to digital measures and things being in one place 1 year and maybe 3 or 4 years later moving and it would be somewhere else.
So generally, we recommend not removing things from digital measures once you put this in. This is your faculty file. And when the faculty file was on paper, you were not permitted, for instance, to go into the dean's office and open up your faculty file and pull out a piece of paper and walk away.
Right.
So I strongly encourage you to keep it where it is, and then add it if you do need to move it. Add it in that new section. So
you're copying it and moving it somewhere else.
Copying and moving,
leaving it there, and then also adding it to the other place.
Right. And you know, there's always going to be a description field or some field that you can indicate. You can say, hey, I'm not trying to dip into the well twice here. This is just a more applicable place, or there was a system change and it's here now. You know, your reviewers are humans, and they're all intelligent folks. They're going to know that something has changed, and that you're not trying to game the system by counting something twice. And if you have any concerns about that, absolutely reach out to your chair or your evaluation committee and say, hey, I've got this thing. I just wanted to let you all know. And there's a great place for that. Great place for that. We're going to talk about it. It's a narrative preview. We'll get there in a minute. So we've talked about the 3 screens here that are imported from KC. We've also got a manual entry screen here for some funded research that may not be included in KC. So let's say you've got an internal award or award that didn't go through OSP. This is where you can add it. Because this screen is a very broad screen. It allows for proposals, contracts, fellowships, grants that have been approved, awards. There's going to be a lot of fields here. There's going to be a lot of date fields here. Only put in what you need to and what's applicable to what you're putting in. So obviously, if it's just a proposal, then you're not going to have a funding start date. You're not going to have a status of funded. You're not going to have a potentially an awarding organization yet. Fill in what you need to. But I would encourage you that if something is in the KC screen, don't duplicate it here. If it already exists there, note what you need to in the KC screen, the imported screen, and don't make a duplicate entry here. But again, if you've already got a duplicate entry here, that's fine. I would prefer that you not remove it, but you can just add a note and say, please note, this item is no longer updated. Please see the imported from KC section for the up-to-date information. So the other big area for the folks who have research as a component of their assignment are going to be publications. So let's spend a few minutes talking about publications. So this screen looks very similar to all the other screens we've looked at so far. You've got an add new button here. You've got entries here that you've already put in. Same with the delete and duplicate buttons. but you'll notice a new button arrive here. It's called import. If I click on import, DM has connections with third parties. So this is great if you're on one of the health sciences campuses that uses PubMed. You can search PubMed for articles from you, and you can import them directly into your account. You can also import from other databases such as Google Scholar. If you keep a list of publications from Google Scholar, you can import via a file. But for instance, actually, no, Latimer, Melissa, you're not going to be in PubMed.
I am not, sorry.
Whoops. This is why you don't demo things live. There is an error right now. That should be fixed momentarily. But if you do go through the process, it will bring in a list of results from PubMed, full citations. You can check the ones that are yours. If you have a common name, you might need to add some additional search criteria. So for instance, we can add your actual PubMed ID if you've got that handy, and that'll absolutely narrow it down. You can also search by date. So when this was published. If you do that, it'll narrow it down. You can check a few boxes and it'll bring the full citation directly into your account. Now, what I note that it does not do, it does not bring in full text copies of the publications. As I mentioned before, publications are one area where you absolutely need to upload a copy of the document itself. So let's look at one of these. Let's say that we had just imported this list of publications, and specifically these ones that have the status of published. If I click on one of these, it takes me to the screen where I would be entering in data. If I scroll down, and I may have mentioned before that there are a number of fields on the screen, and of course not every one is needed, you'll see that there is a space for a supporting document. On this entry, I've already added a copy, a full text copy of the article as published, and then I've added it here. You can add any number of items here, but this is where you should be adding a full text copy of what you have published. I also mentioned before that there were required fields. See this little red star? This means that you absolutely have to answer the question, was this peer reviewed or not? So I'm going to go ahead and click save. When you do the import process, I do want to note that the import process does not automatically set that field. PubMed, for whatever reason, or DM's integration with it, does not have a peer-reviewed flag. So if you do use the import function, make sure to go back and check that box, whether it's peer-reviewed or not, when you're going back, as well as uploading a copy of the full text item. In no event should you have an entry here that does not have some sort of supporting documentation or an answer to that, was this peer-reviewed or not. I do want to briefly show you some of the common options that you run into here. Of course, we've got abstract book, journal article, law review, anything like that. And again, we've always got another if something just quite doesn't fit. You do want to have a status on this. So let's say that we actually start something and it's in preparation. Let's go ahead and say it's a law review. And this is a creative title. We're obviously not going to have many of these fields because it hasn't been published yet. We haven't even submitted it. So it's not been peer reviewed yet. But what's important is that we put in what the thing is, what its title is, and when we started it. So let's say we started it February 1 of 2021. Well, I've given it a date. I've answered the important questions. I'm going to hit save. Oops. I'm going to hit save. So you'll see that this thing now exists. My question to you would be is if you have an update on this, do you need to go back and make a new record, or can you just go back and edit this? Well, the answer should be clear. You can just go back and edit this. So let's go back to this law review article. Let's say that we've actually submitted it now. So it's submitted. We can now say that we sent it to the ABA. And we can say that we actually submitted it on March 31st, 2021, because that day doesn't exist. So now you'll see that the status has changed to submitted or in review. Again, you can come back here the next year. So now it's been accepted. We can change the status to accepted. We can put in some more information about the actual publication, where it's going to be. We can actually upload a copy of the manuscript, and then we can say it's been accepted. So now it moves to the top because it's newer in time. And then finally, when it gets published, you can go back and you can add that publication information to it. So you really only need to make one entry for the life of a publication when you're in this screen. Definitely, I would do not go back and make several entries, because it makes your data entry very difficult to read when it comes to the reviewers, and you may forget to put something in the correct entry, and they may not see what you want them to see if you have several entries. So make one entry for the life of the publication from conception to publication. So that's publications. We've got a couple extra screens here I want to touch on. We've got the bioset screen. This is not for storing of biographical sketches. That's not a criteria for review. This is actually a tool to help generate bio sketches. I have a few users on campus that use this. If you have an interest in using this software to generate bio sketches, please let me know and we'll go through this. Intellectual property, that's just for anybody who has copyrights or patents. That's very specialized. And presentation. So presentation is used frequently. So let's say you give a poster presentation. You can add that here. Again, it's going to look very similar to the other screens. The type of thing that you've done. Let's say it's a poster. Say what the title is. Maybe where it was at. Maybe it was at a conference. Anybody who was here with you. You can add as many presenters or authors as you need. Just like the other upload fields in the system, or where you're adding dynamic things, you can change and you can move the people around. So perhaps you're not the first author, you can move that around. Again, it's going to ask you for sure if it was peer reviewed. And then you're going to choose a file for the presentation and any other files you need to, and then you hit save. So that is scholarship research. Take a drink. Any pause for any questions that we might have? Again, Melissa, I would agree with your response there to reach out to your chair if you do an activity as a faculty member and you're just not exactly sure what that activity might be. First place to do is ask someone in your chair, someone in your department, and then maybe check with your DM admin. And if you can't figure it out, then reach out to me and maybe we can figure something out. I see another question there before I move on to service, Melissa. Should meetings with potential collaborating organizations be included anywhere?
So this is like the pre-work that you're doing before you actually maybe do a grant together or work on an article together. I think that's work in progress, right?
Yeah, that's work in progress. And I mean, to the extent that you want to add that as a nascent publication or something like that, you could add it there, but I'm not entirely certain that would be something that you would document.
Maybe it's something they would talk about in their narrative so that it was clear to their chair and committee that that they have a lot of things that they're working on that maybe haven't come to fruition yet.
Right. There's that keyword again, narrative. We're almost there. So let's jump into service before we finish this out with how to run the report and submit the report. So service, it's very straightforward, but it's by no means the least important. We've got 5 different categories here on the sample screen. If you are in one of the health sciences schools, you will also see a clinical service screen here, because for the clinical faculty, this is a huge portion of their function as faculty members here at WVU. These categories are fairly straightforward if you do service for the WVU at any level. So let's say you sit on the faculty evaluation committee, you sit on the curriculum committee, you sit on the parking committee, and by all appearances, you don't do a whole lot at WVU. You would add that activity here. Professional service. So this is service that you for using the name and the definition, dedicate to your profession. So that's journal reviews. If you review articles, peer review articles for folks in your profession, you're going to add that here. Maybe you serve on a national accrediting board or board of examiners. That's another great example of professional service. Public service is just like it says on the title. So that's outreach to your community, anything that you do as part of your appointment at WVU. I have some folks ask me, hey, I am a member of the Kiwanis Club. Do I put that here? If it relates to your appointment, then yes. So maybe in the extension service, that would absolutely be part of what you're documenting here. However, to the extent that you do public service that isn't related to your appointment, that wouldn't necessarily be appropriate to load here. Recruitment and retention. So these are activities you take with recruitment of students or retention of students that you currently have. So it's similar to university service, but it's a little more specialized. The same goes for faculty mentorship. So faculty mentorship is taking a faculty member under your wing, working with them and helping them. Maybe you're an associate and you've taken a probationary period faculty under your wing to help them through the promotion and tenure process, and that would be something you would document there. I'm going to click on one of these screens just so you see it. Although once you've seen one screen, you've really seen them all. It's going to look very similar. You've got any number of items here if you've already added some data. If you have no data, there obviously won't be any. I did neglect to mention something earlier. I'm glad I came back here. The new interface allows you to select data that you do want to see. So I have set defaults here for what I believe are the most important things for you to see on this screen. However, if something important to you is whether or not you served ex officio, then you can add that as a column to see in the summary screen. And any changes you make will be saved to your account. They're unique to you. So if you like to get this system set up exactly how you would like to, you can absolutely do that now.
Hey, what about clinical service, Brian?
Clinical service.
Sciences faculty.
Clinical service. So I do not have the clinical service screen open. If you will give me a moment, I will do that so that some of the folks can see what that looks like. And while I'm doing that, are departmental communities placed under school division unit? Yes, they are. Thank you, Melissa. So I'm loading up the medical account now so you can see this. If you give me a moment, we can now see this. Okay. So you all should see now what a School of Medicine account looks like. You'll see it looks slightly different, but generally the same. If I scroll down to service, you're going to see a section for clinical service. Excuse me. So this screen, because clinical service at the school, the Health Sciences Center are very broad. I mean, you're doing a lot of things. We actually only do these records by the academic year. So you're only going to have one record per year. So let's say we're putting in for this year, 22. We have different types of service areas that you can document. So let's say that you are on an inpatient consult service. So you can say, I was on call 24 weeks this year and worked with a number of residents and fellows. So you can just very briefly describe what you did here. When it comes to clinical service, there's kind of a parallel system that I believe that the School of Medicine specifically uses to track RVUs and things like that. This is really just to document as a general overview what you do each year when it comes to your clinical service. So you can have more than one area as well, and you more than likely will have one area. So inpatient consults was number one. Let's say you also have some outpatient responsibilities. I ran a clinic for ortho another 20 weeks out of the year. So very briefly describe. We're not looking for huge amounts of detail here as to how many patients you saw or how many RVUs you build or anything like that, but just very broad overview of what you're doing with regard to the clinical portion of your appointment. We do have some fields here for RVUs if that is relevant to your section. And I believe that only applies to one or two of the surgical sections or surgical departments that want that information in the P&T review. Absolutely, if you are in the School of Medicine or you're on one of the health sciences campuses, check with your chair, check with your department committee as to what they expect you to be documenting in the clinical service screen. Again, we understand that is a huge portion of your appointment, and it's very difficult to kind of describe, but we're looking just for a very high level overview of what you're doing with regard to your clinical service. Okay, well, I'm going to switch back to the English account, and we are going to get to the bookend here, the bottom of the sandwich. Last but by no means least. So, archived reports and documents. The first thing I want to point out here is the review, promotion, and tenure screen. If you click on this screen, this is where you are going to find reviews from past years. So if you're brand new, you're not going to have anything here yet. But when your review is done this year, the administrators will load your review documents. So you'll be able to click on a year. Again, these are going to be collapsed, so go ahead and expand them out. And you will actually see your department committee review. Let's say that you're going up, you'll have a college committee review, maybe a school committee review, a director. Any other items that are related to your review, you will be able to find here. You will also find data about the review. So during the review process, the university guidelines specify that you are to be given one of 4 evaluative terms, either excellent, good, satisfactory, or hopefully not unsatisfactory. Those terms will be here that have been pulled from your review document. Always cast an eye on these, make sure they're correct. We have humans doing this. There's no automatic way to put these in. So if you see a problem with this review rating, reach out to your DM admin at your college and let them know, and they'll be able to get that taken care of for you. So that's the first place. Then we've got this screen called supporting documentation. So supporting documentation, CV, report, narrative, other. Let's click on that. Again, if you're brand new, you're not going to have anything here. So let's pretend we're brand new. Now we've got a very few number of screens here, but they are very important. Doug, we're going to get to that on just a moment. You do enter data, you do produce a report, but you need to submit that report, and that's the very last step. It's not an automatic process. We do require an affirmative process of submitting that report, and I'll show you that in just a moment. We're almost there. So I'm going to go ahead and put in that this year is 2021. We've got this very first space. It's called report narrative. I've mentioned a couple times. Melissa's mentioned it once or twice. A report narrative is your chance to put together a very short document. We're not looking for pages and pages of prose here. Typically, 1 to 2 pages is probably going to be enough for an annual narrative. It's going to give context to all this discrete data we've put in the system. I mean, we've spent an hour and 18 minutes at this point talking about where we're putting stuff in the system. We're putting it here, we're putting it there. I'm going to show you what the report looks like in a moment. It's a PDF. It's a long PDF with a bunch of tables with links. The report narrative is your chance to give some context to that report. So let's say that you've had some preliminary negotiations with some folks about doing research, maybe at other institutions, maybe at other departments within the institution that haven't quite come to any kind of fruition yet. You can put that in a report narrative. You can say, you have a paragraph for teaching, research, and service. In the paragraph for research, you can say, by the way, I met with Bob from OSU and Jax from the Department of Chemistry, and I'm in biostatistics, and we're getting a project together that should come to fruition here in the next couple of years. We're going to submit a grant for a couple $1 million. That's great. That's a great place to draw attention to that. When I show you the report, you're going to see that it's linked to the very first page of the report. So it's one of the first things that your evaluator is going to see. It basically just allows you to give context to what is otherwise just a very mechanical reporting of your activities for the year. You'll see that we have a separate field for your promotion narrative. Again, this is something that is strongly suggested you do when you go up for promotion and tenure. It's probably going to be a little bit longer than 1 or 2 pages, but in no event is it going to be longer than, I would say 5 to 10 pages, because you don't want to lose your reader. But it's just a summary of what you've done, maybe some of your highlights, maybe some of your lowlights, maybe addressing some weaknesses you had earlier on, how you address those weaknesses, and the result that came out of it at the other end. that shows growth as a faculty member. It's really your chance to, again, put something together that helps contextualize your review. The third field is current CV. So again, this is belt and suspenders. I recognize that it's a little bit duplicative if we're asking you to put in all your activities uniquely. But I know that everybody keeps their own CV regardless of that. So go ahead and upload a copy of your current CV, belt and suspenders, so nothing's missed. You'll see here for the College of Arts and Sciences, we have one department that has something called an extended credit document. Not many of you will see this screen, but if that's applicable to you, you would upload it there. And then finally, we've got this section called report appendices. So this is anything that didn't fit anywhere else. This may be, for instance, if you were in the School of Medicine and you have some e-values that are evaluations of your instruction that don't actually fit anywhere else, that come from hospital staff or from fellows or residents, you could add them here. Be careful, please. If you find yourself putting a lot of things here, there's a chance that you're just overlooking the correct place for them. So if you're putting a lot of stuff here, reach out to your DM admin, reach out to me, and let's work together to see if we can't find a place for it. It may turn out that you're correct and there's no other place for it. But generally, we want to try and find a space that is not this catch-all screen. So once you're done with that, now the last step, and this is potentially the most, well, not potentially, this is the most important step, that if you don't do this step, your reporting is not done, be it your annual reporting or your promotion and tenure. We have a guide for this, so you don't have to worry about scribbling notes. If you look at the guide, there's a guide that's run and submit faculty productivity reports. Download that guide, keep it on your desktop. It walks you through the very short process, but you have to do this or you're not done. So what I'm going to do is, first off, I'm going to say, all right, I've put in everything I need to put in. I'm going to run and generate that report. I'm going to click on this Rapid Reports button up here. You can also do it through the Reports tab, but it's just easier and quicker if you do Rapid. So the report I want is the faculty productivity report. Now, the critical part of this is choosing the correct date for reporting. Some of you report on the calendar year, some of you report on the academic year. You need to check with your unit, your chair or your committee or one of your colleagues to figure out what your date system is. I'm going to show you one for the calendar year, and I'm actually going to run it over a couple of years just so you can see a number of data points. But you're normally going to just choose your 1 year, January 1, 2021 to December 31, 2021, if you're in the academic or the calendar year reporting system. This option that says file format, Word versus Doc, or Word versus PDF, please choose PDF here. I can't make it default to choose Word doc or to choose PDF, unfortunately. If you choose Word document, you can cause your reviewers problems. They might not be able to click on the link. Please choose PDF. I'm going to choose PDF. I'm going to hit Run Report. It's going to think for a minute. It's going to run the report. Depending on your browser, it's either going to download it automatically or it's going to open up for you. Firefox here in private mode, download it for me. I'm going to go ahead and open it up. And it's going to open Acrobat for me. And I am going to show you what that looks like now. So this is what the report looks like. My screen sharing is paused. It's back again. Okay, so when you run this report, Doug, I just ran it for 2 years as an example. You want to review it just for your reporting period. So if your reporting period is January 1, 2021 to December 31, 2021, you run it for that. So it's going to have a lot of information on here. It's going to have any workload documentation you have. It would have a report narrative and CV if I had put one in for this report period. It's going to have all this information in. What you want to do is you want to spend time. You want to go through this report. You want to say, hey, is this report correct? If I click on a link, does the link work? Is everything here that I'm expecting it to be here? Inevitably, someone will come to me and say, hey, something isn't in this report and it's broken. It's not right. We'll find out that they've put the wrong date on something or they've run the report for the wrong range. So you want to go through the report, make sure everything is there, make sure that the range is correct. It shows you what the range is on every single page. It'll show you, you're running this from 1/19 to December 31, 2021. Make sure everything's here because this is the only thing that the reviewer sees. So after you're sure that everything is there, we are going to go to the submit screen. I'm going to go to submit. You're going to see here that I have some old reports, but if you're new, you're not going to have anything here. I'm going to hit add new. And I would ask here that you don't skip over these first couple of checkboxes. These checkboxes have to be checked before you can save it. And the first checkbox says check here that you've indicated to indicate that you've verified the report is correct. It has functioning links. And this is especially important if you generate as a Word document, but you have converted to PDF. Second, if you check there, you're indicating that you've reviewed it, that it has everything. I do want to note that if you review that document and you say, and that hasn't been sharing, I'm sorry about that.
Sorry, Brian, I was trying to answer a question and I took my eyes off the screen there.
Nope, and I took my eye off the ball. Sorry, it's been an hour and a half and my voice is about to give out. So we're back under the submit screen. Let me take you back there. Sorry about that, everybody. Submit faculty productivity report. I'm going to hit add new. So we've got two checkboxes here again that you've verified that the links work and that what you're submitting is accurate. I do want to note that if you run that report, and you can run it as many times as you want, and you see that you've forgotten to add something. So you say, oh, shoot, I forgot to put in a syllabus. You can go back and add that syllabus. Don't forget to run the report again, because when you run a report, it is taken a Polaroid snapshot that's frozen in time and does not change with the system. So you have to go back and run that report again. So if you make a change after you run the report the first time, you have to run it again. And then make sure that you're keeping track of where you're saving that report so you don't have version control problems. So I'm checking those two boxes. It's 2021. I'm submitting this. I'm going to be optimistic here and say that you all would be doing this on the 18th. Please don't wait until the 31st. The university is closed and tech support is minimal and substantive support is minimal. So please don't wait until the 31st. I actually just did numbers last year. 22% of you waited until the last 2 days of the year, which is not great. Please try to get this done early. So then I'm going to choose the reporting period. So this is annual or promotion and tenure. If it's just your annual review or your continuation review, click annual. If you're going up for promotion, tenure, action review, you're going to choose promotion and tenure. And then you're going to choose that document. So for me, it was in my downloads folder. Make sure that you remember where you save that document. When I click save, you'll note that it's at the top. It says record has been saved. You are now done with your reporting. Until you do that step, you're not done. The PDF will walk you through that step by step. But that is how you run. Well, that is how you enter data. You run your report and you submit your report. And I recognize we are bumping up against the hour and a half. But if anybody has any questions, I will stick around for as long as I can to answer those questions.
Can you stop sharing your screen so we can see them?
I can do that.
Give them a chance to get a drink there. As always, you did an outstanding job, Brian, showing all the nuances of the system and jumping back and forth between health sciences and the other part of campus. So let's see if there's any more questions.
And if we don't get to any questions today, I'm absolutely happy to help and meet with you and point you in the right direction. There's a chance that I might have to point you to another person, but I'll do my best to help.
So we are going to share a copy. Everyone that signed up today, you'll get a copy of the video. You can forward it on to someone else, but we cannot put it on our website until it's closed captioned, right? So we'll get it to you as soon as we get it back in hand, probably within a day or so. You can forward it by email to someone else, but we cannot put it on our website until it's closed captioned, and that takes about 2 weeks.
Hi, Brian. I have a question for you. I'm a new faculty here at the Health Science campus, and I was assigned as a co-director of 2 courses. And I'm not sure if that goes in teaching or in the course supervision.
So more than likely, what school are you with, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm in School of Medicine.
School of Medicine. If you are listed as a co-director, as an instructor in that course, it'll automatically be brought into your scheduled teaching screen for you here in a couple weeks.
Okay,
However, because that's a significant effort beyond just teaching one course, if you're directing, if you have a couple instructors working with you to teach that course, you can absolutely add that in the course supervision as well. So you can have it in both places to indicate that, look, this is something beyond just teaching, instructing, a course. This is actually, I'm a course director here for it as well.
all right. Okay, thank you.
We have another question here about documenting NIH NSF program meetings with directors before the grant.
Part of the process, right? And so not everyone does it, but it would be part of, it could be in your narrative, part of ongoing research that's connected to the grant that you actually submit that year. Maybe the grant doesn't get submitted to the following year, so you still want it part of your narrative in terms of the groundwork that you're doing to get the grant.
Right, and if you have in your mind a publication that's going to come out of this, you can make an entry in that publications and research screen that says, in the gestation period, when you started it and what your current status is. Now, you need to keep in mind, of course, that your department may or may not count that activity for under their particular rubric. You have to look at your substantive guidelines as to whether or not that's something that they're going to say, if that's all you did, that may not be enough. So you need to definitely keep in mind your guidelines when you're putting in things like that.
Hello, Brian. I have a question.
I won't.
Okay, for example, to get credit for the academic time in a previous institution, do I have also to submit previous evaluations from that position? Because I mean, when I am checking here, for example, when you add, professional position prior WVU, you can describe there, you can put data there, but there's no a place to add support documentation.
Well, generally, that's not where we would be looking to document what credit you would be getting from a previous institution. So when you say, you're getting credit from a previous institution, you're looking at things that you did while you were there, correct?
Correct.
So what would examples of some of those things be? Publications, perhaps?
Well, all of the activities, all of the activities related with the academic, functions.
Right. So what you're going to do is you're going to document those things discreetly in the appropriate place. So for the publications, you're going to put them in the publication screen with the date on when they happened. Any instructional activities. And again, it gets a little bit fuzzy there if you're going to be if you're claiming credit for teaching activities, because scheduled teaching really doesn't work. But there's some other places you can put your instruction. You put the dates on them for when you were at your other institution. And then when you run the report, you include the dates at which those activities happened. So all of those activities come into your report and count for your credit at that time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Another question, Brian. How you convert your report into a CV?
So there's actually a report. If you open up your digital measures and you go to the reports tab, and for some reason the browser that I have isn't showing that, there is a CV report. So it's a separate report where you can, I think it's called Vita actually, where you can make a curriculum Vita. So it's not really converting the productivity report to a CV. It's actually a standalone thing. It's a different thing.
So let me just say that sometimes what we have found is when you look at the CV that's generated from digital measures, if people don't put every single thing in, the CV that you upload actually can have more items on it. So you want to make sure that 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 these things are in line with each other, and or you make it clear which one is the CV, right?
Right. Yeah, I would caution everybody to remember that the faculty productivity report is different than a CV. The faculty productivity report includes everything plus a copy of the CV that you've uploaded. If you really want to be belt and suspenders and make sure that you're not missing anything, I know that most, if not all, academics keep their CV outside of DM and they update it all the time. Upload a copy of that to DM, and then we're belt and suspenders, not going to miss anything.
Anyone else have any questions? Chris Staples, you're back.
No other questions right now?
Any questions about the P&T process since you have Chris Staples back?
You may have questions once you get into it. And you actually will have questions once you get into it. So we will, of course, be available.
And I did give them your email address too.
Excellent. Well, my email address, I think my phone number, everything is out there. If you Google WVU digital measures, you're going to have I don't think my social security is there yet, but everything else is there.
So for those who are still remaining on the call, we're going to, as soon as we get the recording back from Julie Black, we'll share it with you, and also going to probably send you a link to get your feedback on the session today. And that will come out either tomorrow or Monday. Okay. And we hope to see you at additional trainings.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.